Welcome to the Brag Effect, where we share easy to understand customer service tips from business owners and leaders that will help you get your customers bragging about you in all the right ways. Hi, I'm Mike Wells, and together with my co-host Michelle Adams. Hey Michelle.
Hi Mike.
A big thanks for joining us.
Today we're talking about mental fitness, and we're chatting with Emily Johnson, the principal psychologist and co-founder at Get Mentally Fit. Emily has consulted as a psychologist to highly respected national consultancy firms, and she supports business owners and leaders with customized programs to better manage workplace stress, mental health, and mental fitness. She's most passionate about applying her own brand of mental fitness education to guide leaders in developing practical skills to enhance their mental well-being and performance. Emily integrates positive psychology, neuroscience, cognitive behaviour therapy, mental toughness and resilience, habit formulation, and mindfulness to deliver highly effective programs. She balances her own mental fitness with weight training with friends, strolling or cycling along the stunning Gold Coast beaches, or by enjoying a hinterland drive in her Mini. Let's welcome Emily. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited about our conversation.
Pleasure.
So, Get Mentally Fit. Can you share with us what you do and what does that mean?
Yeah, certainly. So Get Mentally Fit is a training and coaching organisation. We're based on the Gold Coast. We specialise in evidence-based programs aimed at creating, I guess, what you would call high-functioning business leaders who are at ease. And as a result, they can create psychologically safe and highly productive workplaces. So we really help leaders, teach them how to best self-regulate their nervous system, in effect, by providing a lot of practical skills to deal with stress, overwhelm, anxiety, and distraction.
Awesome. And obviously with everything going on, in the world around us, that's more relevant, than ever. We hear a lot about leaders' mental toughness impacts performance. What does mental toughness mean today? And does toughness, is it what we think toughness means? So is it resilient? Is it, because we don't want tough leaders as in, rigid. So yeah, looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what that mental toughness means.
Yeah, well, mental toughness effectively is a personality trait. So in the large part, it's how people respond to stress, pressure, and challenge, irrespective of circumstance. And mental toughness can be broken down into 8 different components. There's a model out of the UK called the mental toughness model, and also a psychometric that can measure an individual's mental toughness. So it's broken out into 8 different factors, fundamentally around your perception of your life control, your emotional control, whether you're goal orientated or achievement orientated, how you kind of perceive risk and challenge and learning orientation, and also around your confidence, and that's in your confidence in your ability and also in your interpersonal confidence, so how you kind of deal with people around you. So we use this particular psychometric in our programs as a diagnostic and evaluative tool at the beginning to sort of get a baseline of where people's mental toughness level is at this point in time and what they want to work on in the immediate.
And what do you find that most of your clients, like the biggest challenge for them is? Is it, resilience? Is it managing change? Is it stress? Is it, what's the number one thing that you see that's quite common? And obviously everyone's different, but
yeah, I think, well, mental toughness, to go back, I guess, one step as well, because you've mentioned resilience, is mental toughness is resilience and positivity. And I think a lot of the clients that we deal with are business owners whose businesses are actually flourishing, they're doing really well, and they can't keep up. They're really overwhelmed. So it's that lack of clarity of thought and just jumbled, ness within their heads of trying to do everything at once. Is a real challenge. I think that's kind of the biggest challenge that we see. Of course, there is stress and there is anxiety, but I think it's that kind of overwhelm is the number one, factor that brings clients to us.
Yeah, that totally resonates. Overwhelmed because there's so many things to do. And, business owners and leaders are wearing so many hats now, like maybe, due to COVID, they may be flourishing, but, maybe some companies have had to let people go. People are in different roles or have had to adapt. So, that overwhelm of, gosh, where to start, how to kind of stay focused and on point would be really, I would totally resonate with that. So what are some of the tips that you can offer?
With dealing with overwhelm?
Yes.
Well, always the starting point is what's working well for you. That's always our starting point when we start working with a leader, is to identify, well, what do you do that actually supports you and actually helps? And let's do more of that in the first instance.
I love that.
Well, it's often missed, isn't it? It's kind of like, okay, try this technique, try that technique.
And it's not one size fits all.
No, not at all. Very much so when it comes to wellbeing and mental health, it's DIY. That's kind of the stance that we take. What works for you might not work for you. So you've kind of got to trial and test things and see what is working. But in the first instance, let's lock in what's working and make sure we're very conscious of that and we're very pragmatic around the things that are supporting us as a starting point. Yeah.
So one of the things that, I heard recently around, I've always operated with a to-do list, and quite often I find that I'm frustrated by the end of the day because I look at that long to-do list and I, haven't achieved, the things that I wanted to achieve. And so I heard recently on a podcast that talked about focus time and having schedule, like starting really kind of having a schedule for your day and time blocks. And I tried that after I listened to this podcast. I thought, right, I'm going to give this strategy a go. So I scheduled my day, and I, whatever time that I started, I think I got to about, I think I started my schedule at sort of 9 o'clock. And by the time I got to lunchtime, I realized I hadn't even, done that thing that I'd scheduled from 9 till 9:40. And then I just felt this, I can't even make that work. But I sort of regrouped, and then for the rest of the day did kind of backtrack and then started as if I was at 9 o'clock. And I actually achieved quite a bit, way more than what I did with a to-do list. So
excellent.
In fact, I was sharing with you earlier, this Microsoft have got this My Analytics email that I now received that talks about, how much focus time you have, and how you can schedule that more focused time into your day. And it was time blocks. So I'm keen to hear your words of wisdom around this.
Yeah, this is something that I've been practicing this for a long time, because as you can imagine, as a psychologist, we do sort of 1 hour chunks with clients. So time boxing, as it's known, and if you're familiar with Indistractable, the book, Nia Earl is the author, and he talks about time boxing. So effectively what you're doing is what you described, is you're putting chunks of time towards particular tasks, whether it's the client contact time or planning time or focus time or thinking time or writing time, follow-up time, writing your to-do list time, whatever it is, but like really getting down to time boxing your entire day. This is highly effective if you know how long you can concentrate for. So that's something to sort of trial and test over a period of time, because effectively what we know from the research is that we're best working in about 90-minute chunks. And after that, we need to have some kind of energizer to sort of kickstart our day and cause a distraction from the work so that we can refocus as well. But it's really ascertaining, okay, well, how long can I actually concentrate for if I'm going to have my focus time? And in the beginning, it may only be 10 minutes, it may be 15, and you can kind of build that up. So
that's good. I'm glad you said that. 90 minutes. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to focus for 90 minutes?
No, it takes a bit of
start with 10.
Practice.
I can do that.
Start at 10.
So the to-do list, like where did that come from? And that is such a setup, really, isn't it? Like
it is. I mean, what I encourage with clients, if they do use to-do lists, is to do them at night to get it out of your head, down on paper. The brain is for generating ideas, not storing information. So if we're trying to sort of memorize, I've got to make that phone call, I've got to follow up on this, I've got to do that tomorrow, it's just storing too much information in our mind. So get it down on paper, but don't prioritize it in the evening. Get it out at the end of the day. And then when you come in the morning, that's when you do your prioritizing, because prioritizing is a highly cognitive task. So it does take a bit of brain power to actually sort of work out, well, what resources do I need, who, you know, in the way of personnel or materials, and how much time do I need, and blah, 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 with regard, and what is important and what is a priority and what is urgent, etc. And then doing that prioritizing in the morning. And then my suggestion is you have 3 priorities a day. So, and this all stems from a lot of research in neuroscience, in that we can kind of hold 2, maybe 3 ideas in our mind at once. Anything more than that can get a little bit too cluttered. So if we can have 3 priorities a day, then you're going to get that achievement fix and reward at the end of the day, because you've done your 3, so you feel fantastic. Anything over and above that is a bonus at the end of the day, and you're actually getting the things that you need to get done in the day, rather than having this to-do list that sort of goes from Monday through to Friday and nothing gets done.
So when you talk about time boxing, what happens when, you know, let's say you've scheduled some time for a particular task and the phone rings, or, you know, the emails start pinging, or, you know, someone walks into your office that needs your attention, or crisis management or whatever. So how rigid should we be?
Crisis management.
I want to hear about that one. Yeah, like, should we be...
If you've got an employee or a staff member who suffers overwhelm, you'll know at the particular time of the day when it happens.
So, yeah, I mean, should we be rigid with this, or relaxed, or...
Oh, completely the latter. You know, you've got to show yourself some self-compassion when it comes to this, because as a leader, particularly, you need to be available to your staff and have that ability to be flexible and adaptable. So being able to move around, you know, what's happening in your day and reprioritize if necessary. Yeah, key skill. Yeah.
So this is one I want to kind of throw at you. We didn't talk about this before our chat, but work-life balance and mentally fit. I know for me personally, and this is something that, even though I should do more of it, and I know I should, it's I often find that I'm energized by different things, that whether it's, you know, yoga or a networking event, whatever it might be that energizes me, that maybe isn't necessarily focused time that's related to my business. How do you encourage people to fit that kind of, not play, but things that kind of help support that work-life balance?
Yeah,
and, you know, and can I just add,
yeah.
being someone that is very driven and action orientated, is it okay to be, you know, always doing, like, yeah.
few things to unpack there.
Sorry, I just threw 3 questions in there at once.
All good. I'll try and remember them all. And I think, going back to what are some practical tips and things that leaders can do, as well as what's working well for you. Another focus that we have is really what are some restorative practices that are going to support you and help you with your recovery. Because wellbeing and mental health isn't always about action orientated stuff, as you mentioned. It is also about taking a break and what are you going to do in that time that is going to energize you and restore you and help you recover from the day. We don't actually use the term work-life balance. We use the term work-life satisfaction, because I don't really kind of think of it as a balance per se. It's more, are you satisfied in this area of your life, and are you satisfied in this area of your life, and how can we enhance the two? So that's sort of how I come at it, from that mindset, as it were. And what was your third question?
I don't know what my third question was, but I love that point about satisfaction as opposed to that balance, because I personally feel pressure around, I should do more, things that aren't work related, but I love my business and I love working and I'm energized by that. So yeah, that's okay too.
The third question was around the always doing and being quite action oriented. And that's something else, hitting on what we were talking about before in DIY, like, a restorative relaxation activity for one person may be like highly active for another. So for example, a bike ride for you may be really calming and you're out in nature and, looking around and listening to the birds, etc., etc. Whereas for someone else, that could be really exhausting because they're not very fit per se, or whatever the situation is. So again, it's kind of like, what is action orientated to you and what is restorative to you, because it can be very different for individuals. But I think what you're getting at is that sort of achievement mindset orientation of having to keep doing. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something we can take offline and chat about in more detail if you like, to give some practical tips around that. But that's fairly typical of high achievers, because it's that real sense of reward and wanting to get things done, and constantly be in that achievement space. And I guess it's kind of needing to get that balance, so that you're not feeling, if you are feeling kind of go all the time.
Yes, perfect. Love that. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, and this is something that we talk about at Bragg a lot, is, the customer-focused culture creates the right environment for a great customer experience. Mm-hmm. So you've got years of experience in supporting organisation culture and change management. When it comes to creating this type of culture in an organisation where people can bring their best self to work and feel safe, what are the right ingredients for businesses?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned safety there. And when we talk about, bringing your best self to work, we're really talking about the main enabler of psychological safety. So if a person feels safe to kind of speak up and share their ideas, it's going to enable both trust and unfiltered conflict. So that kind of ideological conflict where we can talk about, debate concepts and ideas and things like that. If we have that psychological safety, then they won't feel inhibited. They won't feel that they have to kind of cope and protect themselves. And it really allows people to think creatively, and be more inclusive and focus on, the customer and their needs, and be able to show up as their best self and be really, really present. So I think that's fundamentally, that's kind of one of the main goals, in creating, if we want to create a customer-centric culture, then we need a workforce that feels psychologically safe in the workplace. Another key ingredient is, I guess, the management team being really focused on collective objectives, goals, and outcomes. So that kind of collective results. And they're really crystal clear, not only on, the business KPIs, but the behavioural conduct of the staff as well, that are linked to those KPIs that are going to be able to provide that customer service and delight to customers. So enabling, I guess, that focus around and clarity around expectations from everyone. And with that comes with, the leader is creating the best possible team, not shepherding individuals. So therefore, everybody has to be accountable to each other. It's not just the leader holding one person accountable, that they're accountable to delivering on plans, and they can call each other on their performance and their behavioural conduct, as mentioned. So it's not just the leader's responsibility. So we have this commitment towards what we're all working towards, commitment towards that focus of, customer centric approach. And we've got that clarity and we've got that buy-in for where we're going.
So what are some ways that leaders can create this in an organisation, and particularly help staff to feel safe?
Well, there's a lot of little exercises you can do to build trust within teams, and that's really trying to get to know each other, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level as well, so that we're supportive of each other in what's going on in our personal and professional lives. Definitely the leaders being skilled in having, those sort of challenging, meaningful conversations. So that "are you okay" conversation and checking in regularly is something that we do a lot of in teaching leaders. Okay, well, how to have this conversation, how to open it up, how to best support people, and knowing what support is available internally and externally as well is really important in that space.
That's really powerful. And it reminds me of exactly in my last corporate role, I had a CEO who you also know, Clive, and he would schedule a 20-minute meeting with me once a fortnight. And the first thing he would say, he would only ever ask two questions. One is, "How are you?" And he would always just leave and hold space so well. Often it would result in tears because there was so much stress and overwhelm in that. But just to know that he genuinely cared, and he came from such a place of compassion. It wasn't anything to do with KPIs. It wasn't anything to do with what the expectations of the role were. It was just, "How are you?" And it could have been anything. And the second question was, "Are there any roadblocks I can help you with?" And that he's still a mentor for me today, but that in terms of it's a standout leadership trait and practice that I will remember for the rest of my life. And I can't remember how many times I've even told that story. I tell it all the time, because to me, that's a leader. That's not and there's such a big difference between a manager and a leader. A leader lives by example and genuinely cares, as opposed to that carrot and stick approach.
Yeah, and the thing that I like about that is exactly what you just said, is that genuinely cares, but it's also the consistency. Like you say, every week we had this meeting and he would every week ask these two questions. So he cares and he consistently cares.
Yes.
So yeah.
So some other ways that leaders can create that culture in an organization. So you mentioned, team events, time, one-on-one time where you hold space that we just talked about to build that trust. When it becomes part of a culture's DNA, it's almost like that's when it becomes that peer-to-peer accountability, rather than that, you must do this. It's almost like you see companies and organizations today, they've got their value statement, kind of on their website. But when it's in a DNA of an organization where somebody can pull somebody else up and feel safe to do that, what are some other ways that businesses can create that?
Well, I think when you say it's in their DNA, the clear indicator of that is the language that the staff use. So if everybody's talking the same language and using the same terms, then everybody is understanding those expectations, that behavioural conduct. So therefore, it's easy for an individual to say, well, hang on, you're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and you're not getting the results because you're not behaving the way that you're supposed to be behaving, or you're not following the process that has been agreed upon, etc. So having that kind of collective language around a culture is an enabler to enforce, all of this kind of expectations and enable people to be accountable.
So the other thing I wanted to chat while we're talking about culture is on the point of, what we used to call performance reviews. And so whether it's a weekly catch up or it's once a month or once a quarter, where you get time with your one-on-one with your team to assess how they're going. And I used to love doing this with my team, where I would always kind of go, what's one thing that you can do for me and what's one thing I can do for you? So it's about them just as much as it is about not just them reaching KPIs or expectations. It's about, how are you going in terms of, career growth, or, whether it's a goal that they're trying to reach to, deposit for a house or whatever it might be. So I just can't believe how so many organizations today, it doesn't matter how big or small, just aren't having that one-on-one catch-up time with their people.
And I kind of, I always use the, I don't know what they're called, the pictorial or whatever it is, where to explain this in if you think of a flight path from A to B, if you go along the flight path and you don't have these regular check-ins, what's going to happen is here's your line, and you're going to veer off just slightly. You're still going to be able to see all the landmarks, so you think you're on track, and you're going to veer off until you get to C, and you don't have enough fuel to get to B because you're too far off. You've sort of veered off just slightly on an angle. If we have these regular check-ins along the way, then we can kind of pull people back to that flight path and ensure that they're following the process and going for the collective results that we're after. But without that, if we just do those performance reviews sporadically or don't have regular check-ins, then we're in danger of them kind of veering off on that angle, getting to C, and not having enough fuel to get to B.
So what do you recommend is a good kind of check-in time for that, that catch-up or review with team members?
Minimally monthly, definitely, minimally. And I guess it depends. That's sort of a little bit of a difficult question to answer with regard to, what is the objectives and the goals, and what are they trying to achieve. So dependent upon those things, it would be more frequently, but in any case, minimally monthly.
So when it comes to, one point I wanted to talk about was, you mentioned personality traits. And so, I think it's important that we recognize that it's not that one size fits all approach, even for leaders when it comes to managing a team. Everybody has different drivers, and, like someone might be really driven by affirmations and need that constant reassurance that they're doing a great job. Some might be driven by something else. So this is where, are you a big advocate for personality profile tests, how are some ways that leaders can, psychometric assessments can kind of get to know their team and what motivates them?
Well, yes, I am, obviously, by using the mental toughness questionnaire as a psychometric. I've used other personality profilers in the past as well. The Hogan suite is an extensive psychometric, particularly for leaders. And the thing that I love about that particular psychometric is it measures the dark side of leadership. So it measures when you're overplaying your strengths. Which can be a negative force in some circumstances when it comes to sort of teamwork. So yeah, most definitely do like having that kind of assessment, but using other things like just getting an understanding of people's communication styles as well. So one person, their communication style, they may be kind of an ideas person. So they will go off on huge, great big tangents when you're talking to them, and you may be more of an action communicator. So that might be frustrating to you, but understanding, okay, well, that's the way that they communicate. I've just got to take a pause and let them go off on a tangent and they'll come back. Having that understanding and appreciation as well. And also things like understanding how people learn. So whether they learn through reading or writing, through kinesthetic doing, through auditory, through listening, you can then be able to understand, well, how do they process information quickly to enable them to do their job to their best ability. So there's lots of other little sort of tests and things that you can do in a team that will build self-awareness of yourself and of each other so that you can work better together.
That's awesome. And so when it comes to recruiting, do you recommend that say an assessment be done as part of the recruitment process?
Well, that's dependent on the budget. Some of these assessments are not cheap. And it depends on the role that you're recruiting for. But I think it is good to have some form of either a competency model that you've developed or a psychometric, if you want to go down that pathway, to enable you to have, I guess, an objective view of the person, because we're going to be drawn to people that we like, but we need to be recruiting someone who, particularly if we're leaders, is better than what we can do. We need them for their particular skills, their technical ability, their interpersonal skills, whatever it is. So yeah, it depends on the role, depends on your budget.
True. So I want to just touch on goal setting. So we talked a little bit earlier around, often we can get into overwhelm with, wanting to achieve results for our business. What's your practice when it comes to goal setting? And is that something that you encourage once a year? Just keen to hear, is it something that you sort of more quarterly or
well, it's funny, some people are goal orientated and some people aren't, and that's there's no good or bad in that. It's kind of working out what's going to work for you. So my stance is to put in lots of habits that are going to, and processes that are going to support the direction that you want to go in if you're not totally goal orientated. It's kind of like a different workaround in effect. If you're not motivated per se by goals, because some people aren't, and a lot of coaches will go in with that goal orientation and let's set your KPIs and set your goals, etc. And that's what I was saying at the beginning. Like, we're in the ecosystem of mental health support, we're at the beginning phase. If that makes sense, where we're teaching you how to regulate your nervous system so that you can be in a calm state, to enable you to make decisions, to enable you to think clearly, to enable you to work out how am I going to reach my goals, rather than we're not necessarily business coaches where we're setting goals and then keeping you accountable to those goals. That kind of comes after, once you've got that clarity of thought. So it's interesting with some of the clients that we work with, because some are really goal orientated, and that's okay, we can work with that, and some of them aren't, and we'll work more in putting practices in place and habits in place to support them toward a process so that they can have some achievement. I use the motto, go with your goals, not how you feel, because needing that appreciation, that motivation just doesn't come. We need some momentum. So we need some kind of way in which we can kind of engage motivation to enable us to get the task done effectively. And sometimes when we don't feel like it, we just go, nah, I'm not going to do it, and I'll do it tomorrow. But then the next day it kind of happens, the next day it happens. So going with your goals, not how you feel, is sort of a reminder of, okay, I've got to push past this. I've got to accept that I don't feel fantastic. And yeah, you can make some adjustments, but you know that this is your minimum activity that you've got to do today, or you made a commitment to contact this person, therefore you need to kind of show up in the way that you want to. So using a really awesome technique called mindful gaps is one way to kind of get you there, in that you implement this reflect, rest and recalibrate. So you reflect on what's just happened and what went really well, and what could you improve. You have some kind of rest period, whether that be daydreaming out the window, making a cup of tea, taking a photo of something, doing a meditation, whatever's going to be restful for yourself. And then you recalibrate to show up as your best self and in the way that you need to. So working out, well, what characteristic do I need in this particular phone call or interaction to help me achieve what I need to achieve today? So it might be that I need to be assertive, or I need to be fun, or I need to be empathic or approachable, or whatever it is. And if you can actually relate that back to a time when you have experienced that characteristic, it'll help you to enable that in the moment. And then you can kind of show up and perform at your best, because you've kind of put yourself out there. This is how I need to be. So that mindful gaps is another kind of technique to use to help kind of build that momentum and motivation.
That's really good. And then it's sort of, is that sort of in terms of neuroscience, it's turning on your cognitive brain in terms of to help you get out of that feeling of stuck?
Yeah, I mean, the brain can't do two things at once. So if we're, well, I say that.
My internet browser might say something different.
If something's highly habitualized, then it can. So if you think about it from the perspective of if you're driving, for example, a familiar route, you can have a really intense conversation. If you're driving an unfamiliar route, you can't even listen to the radio. So, you know, we can't have two things going on at once. So if we're in a state of emotional overwhelm or just high negative emotions, it's going to affect our prefrontal cortex, which does all our executive functioning. So that planning, creative thinking, information, recall, et cetera, it's going to be inhibited. So yeah, we can't kind of do the two. So we need to do some sort of practical things to get us into the moment, being more mindful, talking to ourselves as to how do I need to show up? How do I need other people to perceive me in this moment to enable me to do what I need to do? And using questions is a really good way to do that as well. You mentioned before the affirmations. Affirmations are fantastic, and they do provide us with a little sort of positive energy boost, as it were, and positive emotions. But if we can actually extend that with possibility thinking, So tacking on a question, then our brain's going to try and search for the answer and keep us motivated and in a more positive state of mind.
So can we have an example of that? So it would be, how can I do this, rather than I am or I want? Is that?
Yeah, so a simple example was if, you're standing in front of the mirror and you say, I will be happy, I'm going to have a good day today, something like that.
Uh-huh.
Then you tack on, well, how am I going to make myself happy? Who am I going to make happy? What am I going to do to make someone else happy that will in turn make me happy? How am I going to have a better day today than I did yesterday? So you're searching for those answers rather than just using a statement.
That's really powerful. Wow. Stress. So, there's a lot of people who would be feeling, stress for many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The fight or flight, while we're talking about the brain, the fight or flight mode, and you mentioned how that basically it shuts down the normal cognitive thinking that we have. What are some practices that you could share that help you get out of that fight or flight?
One of my favorites is box breathing, if you're familiar with box breathing. Box breathing, unlike circular breathing where you're breathing in and out, is you are breathing in, deep breath, holding your breath for what's comfortable, between 3 to 5 seconds, letting the breath out, and then holding your breath again for 3 to 5 seconds, and sort of doing this around in a box, which is why it's called box breathing. Highly effective because this helps the body metabolize cortisol in the blood. So realizing that, the stress response is around effectively getting your body to enable you to take action. So what it's doing is it's pumping your bloodstream with cortisol, with glucose to enable you to sort of move effectively. But if we stay in that high stress state for too long, then it's unhealthy. So box breathing is a really effective way to calm yourself down, calm the nervous system, and also help the body kind of process and metabolize cortisol.
And you can do that anywhere at any time,
exactly.
Whether you're, in a meeting or on a phone call, and it's very highly effective. I love that.
Yeah.
What else? Is there anything else that you can do to kind of, it might just be walking outside, looking up at the sky, outside at nature, whatever it might be. There's lots of other.
Yeah, there's heaps you can do. And I think, a lot of it is around practicing self-compassion as well, and owning what you know and what you don't know. Particularly, say, for example, if you're in meetings and you've got lots of people asking questions of you and firing questions of you, your role as a leader isn't necessarily there to be the knowledge base of everything. You're there to support the team and provide and ensure that they have the support that they need to enable them to do their job. So owning it is another kind of tactic that I really encourage, in saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I know how to find it out. And I'm going to help you, rather than kind of spitballing and trying to sort of think on your feet, which causes you more stress and anxiety because you're sitting there and there's all this narrative going on in your head. I'm being judged, I don't know the answer, or they're going to think I'm incompetent, etc., etc. So I think practicing some self-compassion and owning when you don't know what you don't know is another kind of really practical way to just take the heat off and calm down.
And also a good way to build trust, I think,
completely.
too. Yeah. That's awesome.
Completely.
So much goodness in our conversation today. How can people, get in touch with you, or do, say, a mentally fit quiz that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we've got a website, www.getmentallyfit.com.au. We're on Instagram, that's getmentallyfitau. We're on Facebook. We've actually got a free program that we're running on Facebook at the moment, the A to Z of Getting Mentally Fit, where we release a letter every fortnight, and we encourage our members to talk about whatever they did for their mental fitness in regard to that letter. So the last week's letter was actually M, so it was mottos. So we were talking about what mottos you have that support you. And yeah, the mental toughness questionnaire, you can go to a link on our website and it'll tell you all about that. And we offer that service with, it comes with a 16, 17 page report and a debrief from myself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Great to speak with you, and yeah, look forward to having you back on the show sometime.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for listening to The Brag Effect.
The Brag Effect is brought to you by Brag Reviews, the review management software that helps businesses improve their reputations, one review at a time. Check it out at bragreviews.com.